All right, welcome back to Business Today. I told you that one figure you have to put in your mind throughout this year. It will be the figure 2.14 trillion. That is the target on matters revenue collection for this financial year, and taxes will be critical in that target. And at this particular moment, I'm going to be speaking to George Mbaye, who is a partner, litigation department at Humphrey and Company, LLP. He's also an advocate of the High Court. He joins us right now virtually all the way. George, are you coming? Are we listening to you from overseas, or are you in Naivasha?
Virtually Naivasha. Thank you so much, Noah. With the technology, we can always do.
Yeah, lovely, sir. So this issue of taxation is very critical, especially this year. Looking at the targets, and the president has been very open about this particular situation, that we are not collecting enough, and we are seeing a change of attitude with the Kenya Revenue Authority being more, focused on collecting more. And this year, starting this year, we've seen a raft of new measures, a number of changes in taxes. And just touching a little bit on it, George, starting off, the capital gains tax, is that a way of taxing the wealthy?
Well, thank you, Noah. In terms of the financial outlook as far as taxes are concerned, looking at the year 2023, a raft of changes have actually happened, and mentioning capital gains tax, specifically a tax focusing on the transfer of movable properties. A shift then from the 5% to the 15%, and this is effective the 1st of January. What is interesting about it is there's been a back and forth from doing away with the tax in 1985, bring it back with an introductory rate of 5%, and then now the shift to the 15%. This is specifically targeted at improving and increasing collection. And interestingly, you mentioned the target given by the president in the new government. Of course, the aim here is to make sure that we see a focus, particularly this government, to target taxation of wealth. I think the president was very clear that they will not wait for us to file our returns at the end of the month. They specifically want to tax the wealth every other day as far as we are concerned.
And that is very critical, just looking at the approach of it. In terms of the reaction, businesses have to be very aware of these changes. I know they are aware, and I know they know of the drive that the government has now in terms of taxation. If I'm a business person, how do I put my house in order? What are the key issues that I need to do in 2023 to make sure that I'm not only fulfilling my obligation to contribute towards taxation, but also to be on the right side of the law?
Okay, as far as basically the only way to find yourself on the right side of the law is to target towards compliance. As you mentioned, what does a business do? For example, looking at a new introduction, for example, in the gaming sector, the government is insisting that the taxes now have to be paid by 1 a.m. It is a daily payment of the taxes. So betting companies, as opposed to waiting for a 30-day period, they are paying as they spend, as opposed to waiting for the end of the month to actually pay gaming tax. With the new amendments to the law, then the business sector and the business people have to adjust and realign in terms of preparations. What then does this mean? There are a number of issues will come up. In terms of the transition, for example, there would be costs that will be incurred. A good example would be looking at the new team system under the VAT collection system. you're expected to have a new gadget. So number one, there would be the issue of cost that every other business person has to look at. Number two, I would talk about, for example, tax planning. With the new changes to the law, it would be important for businesses to plan properly for purposes of collection, for purposes of compliance. Number one, and which is very important, a lot of businesses do not align themselves in as far as the law is concerned. We are looking at a situation where you have people who have not registered. Number two, for purposes of tax planning, we then need to not only file our returns on time, we need to file them accurately. We need to give not only accurate returns, but we need to find ourselves in a position where we can give proper documentation to support our returns. A lot of business people then find themselves in trouble as far as the tax compliance is concerned, and the Revenue Authority is very robust in terms of enforcement. A lot of business people find themselves in problems because of not doing proper tax planning, which entails, number one, being knowledgeable, number two, having the right people in place to look at the law and how the business operates. Okay, then for example, talking about payment of taxes. Are the taxes paid on time? We are aware of the due dates so that we're able to avoid a situation where we have additional assessments and we have to have a back and forth with the Revenue Authority. So a lot of issues would then go into planning, and whether we like it or not, probably it goes into what we call culture change.
Definitely. And we know there trickle-down effect for that, for the businesses, increased cost somehow also trickles down to the products that they're selling or the services. But there is a booming space, the online space. COVID started that, and we've seen a very, increase or rather incremental move towards digital space. Now we call it the digital world, and business also happens there. And looking at the raft of changes that we've seen starting the 1st January 2023, the 16% value added tax on electronically supplied services. I know this is a very vibrant sector, but also relatively young. In terms of those people who are operating in the digital space, what should they be privy to in regards to taxation and the law?
Well, no, again, as part of the raft of measures, in 2023, we are looking at taxation of specific sectors. Talk about your Spotify, talk about your Netflix, seeing messages, those of us who are on Twitter, that the effective rate in terms of VAT is now in place. So, of course, the government, in a sense, trying to find a way of increasing or expanding the tax base. I may want to disagree. I'm not too sure it is the best way out. But look, we can't avoid it. The fact that the digital space has largely gone uncontrolled. So, of course, with the introduction of digital tax, which is, of course, is a tax which, contrary to many assertions that have gone out, is a tax not on the purchaser, but a tax on the seller. So anybody who transacts on a digital platform and, of course, generates some form of revenue is expected to pay 16% under the VAT regulations 2022. So it would be important then for the consumers to be alive to the fact that, of course, the trickle-down effect, you talk about introduction of 16%. Does it then have an effect if I have an online platform where I sell laptops, for example? If the price of a laptop was 10,000 shillings, the seller would definitely pass on that cost. So, of course, we talk about high inflation rates, the government trying to deal with that, but having a counterproductive effect, because then that 16% on the digital platforms would definitely end up in the consumer's pocket. So, which doesn't really make sense in terms of, the net effect. We are looking at a situation, yes, the government wants to collect revenue, but then it has become a trend where we tax and tax and tax until we probably may not have anybody else to tax.
Yeah, and George, I mean, the alternative has been to widen the tax net, all right? Especially saying that a lot of businesses operate in the informal sector, bringing them into the tax net. In terms of that, we saw also the proposition of introducing the minimum tax. So if you're running a business, whether it's profitable or not, you have a 1% minimum tax, which again we're seeing a tussle. Kenya Revenue Authority is already at the courts in regards to this particular issue. They've moved to the Supreme Court to overturn, the barring of minimum tax. Talk about that balance. Is the approach, should we focus on widening the net, or should we go the minimum tax way so that those who are not paying are able to pay?
Well, no, in terms of the minimum tax, a very interesting position now that the taxman has gone to the Supreme Court. But looking at the position advanced by the Kitengela Bar Owners Association, who went to court in the High Court, the introduction of the Finance Act basically was targeting gross turnover, which was being done through Section 12 of the law. And in a sense, yes, the government, the Revenue Authority was shooting at seeing how they can level the operating field in terms of ensuring that every person gets to pay their fair share. But a number of challenges then crop up when you ask, is this the way to go? The assumption with the enactment of the specific provision was that everybody earns at the same rate, okay? Sometimes we forget that there's some high income earners and others are low income earners. So you're looking at a situation, for example, where you're creating a burden for what you'd call new companies or startups, okay? Who would be expected, whether they've been in the space for 3 weeks or 3 months, to declare 1% of their gross turnover, okay? Number two, we are looking at, let's then go back to the principles of taxation. You can only tax what you call income. So with the minimum tax, we are looking at a challenging situation where irrespective of whether it is income or not, then you'd be expected to pay taxes. So for those reasons, the High Court then declared that provision, suspended the provision. The Court of Appeal has also declared the same provision unconstitutional. You'd want, for example, to look at what happens to a loss-making entity, a firm that is perennially making losses coming off the backdrop of COVID-19, for example. Very many people business people have gone out of business. Even before they go out of business, they'd be expected now to declare and pay the minimum tax. So it would be unfair. Of course, the minimum tax introduction, very, very important in terms of trying to manage the would-be tax evaders, but then extremely unfair to say that you lump the tax evaders together with the genuine people who want to conduct business and are forced to go into that kind of sector. But yes, again, interesting to see what the Supreme Court will be ruling in terms of the different propositions given.
George, I mean, the unpredictability has been quite a challenge for the taxation regime in the country. That's something, even yesterday while we were talking to the Kenya Association of Manufacturers, they were talking about creating a system, a tax system that is predictable and incomes, the formation of a tax policy. Explain to us what is the importance of a tax policy and the expected, changes that if we are to get one soonest, it will bring to our economy.
Okay, now in terms of predictability, over the past few years, we have seen specific changes being made to the law. And of course, you'd expect that they're influenced by the changing trends, the climate, etc. But the importance then of a tax policy and the proposed tax policy that was introduced by former Cabinet Secretary Ukur Yatani was meant to introspect and look inward and outward, just to try and understand how then we would improve, review, and have an efficient tax system. We are looking at a situation where, if you look at the draft policy, we are looking at a situation where the policy seeks to promote what we would call equity or equality in tax administration. So talk about predictability. The aim of the tax policy was to basically bring all stakeholders together, see whether we can have a tax law, for example, that would create an enabling, predictable environment, number one. Number two, also have predictability in as far as the tax rates are concerned, in order to improve stability in the economy. So that as opposed to having last year having 5% of CGT, the subsequent year you have 15%. Who knows? Maybe next year we'll have 25%. It's interesting to see how the different, the Revenue Authority has argued, and Treasury has argued that look at our neighbors. Uganda has 30% as CGT. That to me sounds like more or less like wait, next year we are 25 and probably we'll be at 30 in the next subsequent year. So we look at the many challenges. I would actually probably talk about the many challenges. We appreciate the many challenges that the Revenue Authority has in terms of meeting their targets, talking about an issue of underperformance. But then again, it's important that we have or are able to provide a basis. We should not just review the tax laws, probably for lack of a better word, haphazardly, every subsequent year. We need to have a proper basis for review, and that is why the national tax policy proposed seeks to deal with. One thing that I must support Treasury and the Revenue Authority for is because of the stakeholder engagement that has happened. It has been all-encompassing, and a number of people have been, majority of the players have been involved, which has then given the document a lot of support and approval of sorts. As regards the proposals therein, one that is very important is the proposal that tax laws be reviewed after every 5 years. And this now then goes to support what we're talking about in terms of predictability, in terms of having a well-known criteria for businesses to be able to plan that for the next 5 years, these are our probable rates for purposes of taxation. Number two, also there's a proposal to include talking about specialized courts. Of course, we have the Tax Appeals Tribunal, which has done a fantastic job looking at the numbers, for example. And let's look at the figures, perhaps, for example, for last year. I think in terms of appeals filed and
all right. George, we've lost you there. I think you've covered ground, actually, looking at some of the changes, the proposed tenets within the tax policy, as you put it, having that predictable environment, and there's that proposition to have sort of standard taxation within 5, changes at least after 5 years. So finishing up, George, we had lost you for a minute.
Yes, sorry, no, I was saying in terms of the proposal for the specialized tax courts. Of course, yes, we have the Tax Appeals Tribunal. I was mentioning, if you look at the turnaround in terms of numbers, number one, very quick turnaround time in terms of resolution of tax disputes. So, of course, under the Tax Procedures Act, the tribunal has a 90-day period. 6 months to conclude the matters. We talk about ADR. Successfully, I think I was mentioning about close to 600 matters concluded, and the Revenue Authority being able to collect billions, to unlock billions of of taxes that has been held. Now, if the tribunal did not exist, we'll be looking at matters joining then the High Court and then the Court of Appeal and the Supreme Court. It doesn't mean that matters coming from the High Court do not go, tribunal do not go to the High Court. Okay. But having specialized courts would then mean that if a matter then came from the Tax Appeals Tribunal, the same way it would probably go to, we have the Criminal Division, the Labor Division, would then have a specific tax division, which would then fast track hear matters and be able to predictably make decisions as opposed to being lumped into what we would call the commercial division. Okay. So I think it would go a long way in terms of ensuring that we have that stability. Okay. It would go a long way in terms of ensuring that that parties are able to resolve their issues. Okay. Another key proposal is, for example, that the Revenue Authority would have or conduct more in terms, there's more emphasis on taxpayer education and awareness. It also encompasses and includes county governments which are to comply with tax policies. And another more important proposal is that ministries and government departments or agencies should be able to comply with tax laws. Noah, the other day, the president making it very clear that intergovernment agency litigation is not allowed. Would probably be interesting to know how many government agencies have pending tax issues with the Revenue Authority.
Definitely.
So such proposals definitely go a long way in terms of giving predictability, yes, and a form of stability so that people are able to plan for purposes of tax now.
Definitely. And I'm glad that unfortunately our time has run out, George, but subsequently we'll be engaging on this issue of taxes because it's becoming very sensitive. It is actually very sensitive. It is at the core, at the heart of the development of this country. And it's imperative that all of us understand the way the tax system works and some of these proposed changes. When we talk about tax policy, we'll be having more engagements in regards to some of the proposed changes, what can be tweaked. And even looking at the some of the enterprises, government-owned enterprises or state-owned enterprises, and the way they are performing in terms of remitting some of their dues. But thank you very much, George Mbaye, who is partner litigation department at Humphrey and Company LLP, giving us the ins and outs on matters taxation 2023. What an engagement, and that's where we put a full stop on today's show. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Nokip Kimboy. Up next you have New York KTN. Stay tuned.